Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Top 5. I know it's been months since you saw us playing your least favorite drinking game ever, but we are back. Fire Guy Ryan and I are back, and we're here tonight to talk about horror films in this modern era. I'm joined tonight, of course, by Fire Guy Ryan and Comic Tom. How you guys doing?
Oh, it's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having us. How you doing? You just got here, my man.
I'm doing pretty good. It's good to be here, not in my living room like normal.
I'm digging that Scarface shirt.
Thank you. I like it. It's comically oversized, so it works.
It
works very well.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having us, John. We love horror movies and we love talking about them. And we also like hearing you talk about them so we can do all that together and have a good time.
Well, we have talked several times, Ryan and I, and then you guys on your show about sort of a love for horror films and as teenage years, what those films kind of meant to us. And I'm growing up as a kid, they were my favorite kind of film. I was really into Nightmare on Elm Street, and knowing that Freddy Krueger lived like in my general neighborhood was pretty badass. That Robert Englund was in our neighborhood as a kid, and I'd see him at the beach hanging out, and he was just a really cool guy. It sort of spurred my love of horror. And then for me, I went into film school, and everybody on the cheap was trying to make cheap horror films. And then at film festivals, it was like everything I saw was horror films. So it was a big era of my life. I don't know about you guys.
Absolutely. For me, that was I don't know, like just between all my friends in my teenage years, every time we got together, it was just, we would find horror movies to watch. And it was like, we would walk the aisles of Blockbuster. We would pick out whatever looked scariest on the cover. And then also ones that didn't look scary because you never knew. Sometimes those were even scarier than the ones that actually had a good cover. And I don't know, I remember like a lot of good bonding moments with that. My dad was always into horror movies. I like a lot of dark stuff. I like reading a lot of dark stuff. I grew up on like Stephen King and all that good stuff. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I agree. Especially with the Stephen King stuff. Like I was going into the video store a lot by myself, maybe with my brother sometimes to get horror movies, but I was pretty single-minded on my own path with horror. But it's definitely my favorite genre, I think, in all of storytelling.
I will happily admit I fell off the wagon after working at film festivals a long time and seeing some really crappy horror films come through. I kind of lost my taste for it, but I would say in the last like 10 or so years, I've started to dabble again and find a lot of good stuff. And this was a fun experiment for me to go back and sort of rummage through what people were recommending, what was out there, to kind of find some things that I had never come across before. I'm going to run through the chat here before we really get into what horror is and how we define some of these things to make our lists. We had Mr. Comics with Bueller, first one in the chat, ready to go, wrenching it up. So thank you, sir, for being there. Old Wolf is in here. White Whale Comics, another one of my wrenches. Alec, thank you for joining us. Let's see, they were having a full discussion, making a whole chat about horror films. Kachung is in here. TJ the Slab Dragon Watson is in here. The Edwin the Comic Jabroni and Perry Comics are in here. I hung out with those guys on Tuesday. We were looking at the buy or pass books for New Comic Book Day. Those guys are awesome. Let's see, Orchid Joseph is in here. And Pages, Films, and Plastics, thank you for coming by. I Collect a Lot and Comic Books NYC. Thank you guys all for coming. We really appreciate it. JP Budget Collecting, right there, buzzer beater. So when we first started thinking like how to break down horror, Ryan and I went back and forth a lot because what I qualify as horror and the movies that I would pick would definitely be older. And so we kind of had a debate of thriller versus a horror film and eras of horror. And we struggled to narrow the list until we kind of decided on modern. And to do that, we had to pick a demarcation line, right? This is the line when horror became modern. And Ryan, do you want to talk a little bit about why we picked Scream to be that marker?
Damn, now I forget why we picked that movie.
I set him up with a question.
What are we talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, John, can you just repeat all the things you just said?
Just repeat everything.
Can we start over? Kachung, thanks for being here. You there? No, but no, you told me. No, you told me because I mean, like that's when things really changed, right? Like it's a slasher. It's introducing slasher films in a new way. I don't know.
That's exactly right. Like before Scream, you had a lot of horror films were kind of samey. It seems like you had a lot of sequels, a lot of Elm Street sequels, a lot of Friday the 13th sequels, Halloween
everything
sequels.
became kind of campy for a real while, right? Like horror was kind of jokey, Jason in New York and all these kind of things, right? And then all of a sudden it was like horror can be self-reflexive, right? It knows what it is and is okay with it. And yet at the same time doesn't sacrifice fear for laughs and can meld the two. And I think it's, for me at least, it was like a full game changer. And I was like, I hadn't been to a theater to see a horror film in a really long time. And I was just absolutely back in. Did you guys, I don't know if you saw it in the theater.
I was 7. I definitely rented that one with my parents. We watched that in the living room.
And I'm feeling old right now.
Yeah. If I was 7, that means Tom was like 2. I don't know the exact age difference.
Okay, show is over.
Not that much apart.
Out, we are done.
Exactly.
I remember getting the mask and dressing up. For Halloween.
I was definitely the
before
Scream guy.
I even saw the movie in its full length. But I did see a lot of horror movies at a very young age. My dad was, I think he would probably not make the same decisions. Some of the movies he was like, yeah, it'll be fine. But you know what?
Tommy's a tough kid. He can handle it.
But no, I mean, absolutely. Like, Scream was really good. I really enjoyed Scream.
I really wanted to pick it. It didn't make my list, unfortunately. But
didn't make my list either.
It made my list, but we used it as the demarcation line, which meant that films had to be released after 1996. That was the year that Scream came out.
Right.
And so since that time, I feel like horror has gone through several iterations. There have been several films kind of marking key moments in whether you like the torture porn that kind of became the thing for a while. I know that the paranormal was a huge thing for most recently Ryan's favorite era in horror. And I think that it's kind of fun to watch the ways that horror has evolved over this 2-3 decades. Is there a genre or an era of horror here in this modern era that you guys are really a fan of?
I didn't realize until I picked my whole list, but I actually ended up picking a lot of movies, almost like a representative from each of these kind of like sub-genres that have sprung up since Scream. Like I have a torture porn movie on my list. I have a paranormal film on my, not literally a paranormal film on my list, but I have a ghost kind of movie on my list. I have a found footage movie on my list. There's a lot of different sub-genres of horror that have sprung up over the years. I think we could even say a bunch of different kind of almost Scream-like movies have sprung up since then that have shaken up the whole genre in a way.
Found footage on my end. I'm a big fan of shaky cam. I'm a big fan of kind of the first person view angle. I think that the limitations of that forces interesting cinematography, but I have some different examples on my list of that, some that aren't. I like dark stuff. I like stuff that sticks with you. It sticks with you long term. I think that's one of the things that horror does for me that other genres don't. And it's an interesting feeling. It's an interesting thing to appreciate. And especially since we work in a creative field, we're making a lot of stuff on Adobe, working and thinking in a creative way. I appreciate a lot of, what goes into creating something scary. And that's really what my list is made up of.
And when I went to in those early film school days, there was a lot of talk about how fear and creating fear in an audience was like the primary, original goal of cinema. You talk about the original footage of a train going through the station made people run from the theater in horror. People were like, "Oh my God, there's a train that's going to crash into this theater." And then, of course, like Nosferatu and all these great kind of early monster films, and then into the Universal heyday monster films, the Frankensteins and Draculas. I think, and even early Spielberg. I mean, Spielberg, all of his early films had this kind of creepy horror almost element that I think you can't disregard the quality and, like you're saying, the restraints in cinematography and editing can usually make some really original filmmaking.
Absolutely. I'm excited to hear what's on your guys' lists.
So usually what happens is we start with the person not hosting. And so I'm hosting, so that means Ryan is going to go to the bottom of his list and give us his number 5. As usual, if one of my picks is on one of these guys' lists, I got to take a shot of tequila. I got my new bottle. I finished off the other one since...
Wow, you prepared.
Yeah. Hey, Costco
5 shots.
Baby. I'm a Costco baby.
There you go.
So I'm ready. I got my list. I will say Some of mine are going to piss off the chat.
Uh-oh.
When I qualify something as horror, I'm going to have to back it up. So I will do my best to hopefully not anger the audience. We'll see how we do.
So when Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is on your list, then you have to explain why it scared you so much that you picked it?
Legally Blonde, I'm just going to explain it.
Exactly.
I would also appreciate if the members in the chats, as we go through these numbers, if they throw down what their number 5 would be. I know we put a lot of time into this over this week, but if you have a good number,
yeah.
And if you have a number that you can think of and you want to share, we'd love to.
There's some great ones already being thrown out in the chat, so we'll have to see if some of those come up on our list, because I see White Whale and NYC are throwing out some ones that were on my longer list.
Okay.
Not necessarily on my 5. We'll see.
All right, let's do it.
Well, I made the mistake of I had a hard time stopping researching. I love horror movies, and I kind of went overboard over the past like 2 weeks watching a bunch of different scary movies. And I watched one like 12 hours ago, and now I think it slipped into number 5. Like I had a lot of debate, but I watched Hereditary this morning, and I think that's my number 5 pick. I don't know if either of you gents have seen that. It's like from last year.
No, it's on Amazon Prime.
I do
want
not
to watch
know
it.
this movie.
And I want to watch it, and I decided not to because it looked kind of lame.
Yeah, it's really dark. Like the first hour of the movie is really heavy. It's all about like death. It deals with this family, and family members of them keep dying. Like grandma dies, and it's got like 3 different funerals in the movie. It's a big downer. And then the second half is it's a lot like The Witch. You and I sat down and watched that a while ago, and that's a movie that slow burns. And this
what are we
movie
doing
is
about
like that in the same way.
I just want to make sure.
We don't
That's
care.
true. I don't think
don't care.
Roll it. Just roll the dice. It's happening.
this movie is relatively recent, and I think
I'm
I
gonna be
think I want Tom to sit through this one. I think he might like Hereditary, but that slipped in and made my my number 5 right at the last minute there. It bumped out a different movie that I had picked for number 5. I don't want to say it because I don't want to.
We'll spend a
spoil
little
one of
time
your guys'
honorable
picks.
mentions if nobody discusses whatever got bumped for you. So Hereditary, I'm going to have to add this to my list of things to look for. White Whale, he would have had that as his number 2.
Ooh.
Whoa. Okay.
The daughter in the film is named Charlie, so it was a little concerning. But other than that, yeah, it's a really, really good horror movie.
What was good about it other than it being paced well?
It was paced well. It definitely qualifies as my pick for a paranormal film. It deals with it actually feels a lot like a Paranormal Activity film, where there's like a shadowy cult hanging around the edges of the movie and some sort of possession stuff, but it's not the front and center kind of element of the movie. The movie's about it stars Toni Collette, actually. It reminds me a lot of Sixth Sense in a way that she plays the beleaguered, harangued, put upon mother character that she plays in that movie.
Okay.
And you just kind of watch her whole family unit fall apart all around her. It's very depressing, but really, really, really good.
Super talented. I will say that she's one of the best parts of the Sixth Sense, and she nails that.
It feels like a spiritual sequel in that sense, almost, if you look at it through her performance. So yeah, that's my number 5, Hereditary.
Nice.
Not on my list. Very good.
Right.
I have a new movie to watch. I like this show already.
There you go. Recommendations.
All right, Tom, you're the guest. Would you like to tell us what made number 5 on your list?
Yes, sure. I would be happy to. This is a great film. It's called Digging Up the Morrow. Have you ever heard of this film?
I have
Nope.
not.
Okay, this came out in 2014. It's by the brilliant Adam Green. Okay, this film is so good, and I appreciate it so much. I watch it regularly for a couple different reasons. And I don't want to give away too much because this is just like, it's a gem. But it is a documentary. Adam Green is a famous horror movie maker. He's made a bunch of different films, and he's done some TV work. This is a small project that he did. And essentially what he did is he made a documentary about himself, about his crew, who is big in the horror community. They hit conventions just like we do here in the comic book community. They're like very active in the collector's market, things like that. And it's a documentary that follows their team being contacted by a fan who has evidence that monsters exist. And this film follows that question in trying to figure out if it does or not. And what I will say is that practical effects have never been so good in a film.
Yeah.
And without giving away too much, what I will say is, is it real? Is it fake? That's really what they're trying to put out there. Like, you know, it's a movie, but it's the question of throughout this film, is this person who's contacting this production crew, is he being honest that that he has proof that monsters exist or not? And it lends to some interesting storytelling, and I highly recommend it.
I feel like we watched this.
We did.
Okay, it sounds extremely familiar from one
I'm
time.
like, you've seen this with me,
Okay.
man. I've made you watch
this
You
is
watched
very.
it with me, Ryan.
I do not remember it at
I'm
all.
like,
though.
am I like confusing Ryan?
nope.
Because like, I'm like, why am I not saying this right? And I'm questioning what I'm saying. I'm kind of stuttering a little because he's watched it with me.
Yeah, and I was like, this sounds really familiar.
I'm like, am I saying something wrong, Ryan? He's like, no, man.
It was not American, right? It's a foreign film.
No.
No, it's not a foreign film.
All right. So
I thought I remember this
I'm gonna
being a
make him watch
foreign
it again.
movie.
No,
I guess I'm watching this again.
He's gonna watch it again. It's
There we
okay.
go.
I will say you bring up a great point, Tom, about practical effects and the use of effects in films, because I think that films that over rely on it are generally the ones I enjoy the least, but films that use them sparingly and to good effect are the ones that usually last longer with me. And I think you even mentioned this in the live stream that Ryan sent me not too long ago, that you guys were talking about horror, that it sticks with you longer in a way because you want to know, like, how did they do that? It seemed so real, you know?
Oh, I'm excited to talk about the next one on my list. But John, what do you got on your number 5?
Okay, this is the one that's going to anger some of my audience, but they know that I go a little outside the box on these. So this is a film that a lot of people might call a drama or a thriller, but I would say it is certainly no more boring or drama-like than Witch, which I know a lot of people are throwing out in the chat right now, which is a crap movie, and TJ Watson, do not watch that movie because it sucks. But
TJ, don't listen to him, TJ.
Instead, I chose Zodiac. Now, I know a lot of people are going to call this a thriller, but this is a movie that scares the daylights out of me because, number one, it happened and it's real. And number two, the way the director shoots it, where you're in houses and you don't know if you can trust the person you're standing directly next to, where you're getting ears in the mail, where you climb into a car because you're stranded on the side of the road and you and your baby are in a car with a person who's trying to kill you. And it's real. It's based on real case studies. And I can't tell you how much that movie stayed with me after I watched it. And it's just, and because it has no natural ending, because there is no resolution, it's almost like it's always out there. This person is always out there. And this was the movie I almost didn't put on the list because I knew that it would piss people off that it's not horror. But god dang, it's amazing. It's an absolutely phenomenal film.
That pick doesn't piss me off as much as I was prepared to be upset by your choice. that almost counts. I wouldn't still count that as a horror movie. I definitely think that's more of a detective cat and mouse kind of cop investigation movie. Right. But I do agree with you.
I can honestly say, of the 16 films I watched in preparation for this, this scared me more than any of them. And it still to this day scares me. Like, I can't even imagine.
California, man.
So far, Ryan is winning, says White Whale Comics.
Yes. Dude.
So no crossover at this point.
No crossover.
They're already in the chat talking about Heroes in Crisis and throwing flames at each other over Heroes in Crisis, which I think is amazing.
Oh, no.
But we're going to move on to number 4 pick from Fire Guy Ryan.
Number 4, I picked The Witch. John.
That's actually convenient because that's my number 4 too.
Woo!
Are you kidding me?
Ah, it's right here. That was my next one.
We watched it together, so I mean, that works.
Yeah. Kind of lame, but it's cool.
All right, I want to hear you guys talk about this because I will say I went out of my way to watch this. It's streaming, and I just thought it was boring, stupid, and pointless, and not scary in any real way. I mean, there were maybe 2 moments that I was like, well, that's kind of weird and creepy, and that was it.
The horror movies I love, my favorite horror movie of all time is Rosemary's Baby. And I like the fact that the horror in that movie builds up around the edges and you don't really see exactly what's happening until the very, 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 very end. And that's kind of a common theme, I think, with the movies I pick. Hereditary is kind of like that in a way too, but The Witch is even more so, where you're kind of lulled into like a false sense of complacency by the boredom, I guess you could say. But
that's well put.
For me, I don't think I just watched it again a few days ago, and I don't think the the thing you think of as boredom is really stuff happening. You're just not really paying attention to it the first time, I guess, because you're not really on the lookout.
That's funny. I immediately watched it twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I have to watch it again now. So you get 5 hours of movie, or it's like 2 hours long.
It's a pretty hefty movie.
Almost 2 hours long, which is unusual for a horror film. So like they could have made it an hour and a half. They could have done that, and they didn't. So did they? You know what? I could be putting my phone in my mouth. How long is this movie? Hour and a half. So there you go. They could have. So they okay.
It feels longer than it is.
It feels longer than it is. So
it's slow.
Yeah, I'm glad I checked that. But I think this is where we may,
I'm surprised Tom and I agree on this.
Well, I just really like the other three on this list, but this could have easily taken my number 3 too. But I put it in my number 4. I showed it to you when he mentioned, I'm like, oh, that's my next one.
Mm-hmm.
But The Witch is just that. It's a slow burn to the end, and you have that exact feeling. And I think that's what that whole movie's about. And it's so disturbing that it's a great payoff, and you watch it again. So it's more like a 3-hour movie for me.
I don't want to get too controversial, but
Ryan, you always get controversial.
I'm known to be controversial.
You're one of the most controversial people I've ever met.
I'm a spitfire. I don't religion as a concept is it works for me in horror films. I have a lot of religious tinged horror in my favorite list in my brain. And I like the way that this movie uses religion, because it takes place in like the 1700s, 1800s.
In the Village, if it was real era.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
In a way that like religion was used to kind of ostracize this one family, and at the same time, religion was what brought that entire community together. Because The Witch is about this small family that gets ostracized or excommunicated, banished from an overall larger colonial kind of community that they were a part of. So I like the way that religion is used in that movie to kind of differentiate this smaller family from their larger community.
The boredom turns into stressfulness, and then the stressfulness turns into dread, and then the dread turns into just straight horror. And then it's so morbid and it like sticks with you that you just like think about that and go, oh man, I'm glad I don't have a kid. As someone who doesn't have a kid, and I'm like, dang, that is dark. That is really dark. Yeah. And there was legit a point where I want to be like, turn this off. Like, I'm kind of bored. I'm like legit bored of this movie.
I remember thinking
and
that
then
when we were watching
boom, we end it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Ryan, what was that? And when we just had like a heart to heart, we're like, dude, that was freaking crazy.
Yep.
It was nuts. Anyways, number 4.
I will say there were 3 maybe moments in that film that I enjoyed, but there were also films like Tom, like you're saying, where I was like, I'm just bored. I'm like falling asleep. I don't care about any of these characters. I don't know what's going on. Nothing's really interesting, and it's so pointless. And then even at the end, I didn't think it was horrifying at all. I just thought it was like, okay, well, whatever, I guess. Like it did not make me want to watch it again. It didn't stick with me. There's one moment with the witch in the woods towards the beginning with the like the mortar and the pestle, I'll just say, that freaks me out. But that's the only scary moment for me in the entire film. The rest of it is just like, okay, it's kind of odd and a little creepy, I guess. But
I like that. That's what he came out with. I want to know from the audience too, like what they think about The Witch, because people are saying it already.
Like Alec literally says it's the greatest and that it's amazing and that he's staying because of you guys. And Black Phillip, he's lots of little goat emojis. He's loving it.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, you got a few other people saying that it's boring. He says couple people saying Zodiac is more of a horror film than Witch, and so it's a great banter going on.
I never said it wasn't. Zodiac's a good horror film.
Yeah, Zodiac's good. Yeah. I think, John, you need to watch The Witch with an eye for the director style, like the camera work and all that is really good in that movie. Yeah.
Production design, cinematography. I don't think there's a more top-notch film. I mean, it is the costumes, the sets, the cinematography, the editing. It's all top-notch. It's just too bad they didn't buy a script.
It reminds me of Stanley Kubrick in kind of in like a slow burn sort of way.
Gosh. So
if we went back farther, I'd say Clockwork Orange is a horror film for me.
I want to know what your number 4 is that beats The Witch. What beats The Witch? This number 4 has got to be really good.
Let's do this. So this one was the first film I thought of when we started talking about this, and I even mentioned it to Ryan. It was my fault, so he probably knew this one was going to make my list. But The Others with Nicole Kidman.
That's pretty good.
This movie freaks the daylights out of me. Talk about a paranormal topic done right for me. Like cinematography, sets, production design. I don't care. It's all top notch. What for me gets me on this is the story. Nicole, just like this slow deterioration, just breaking down, the creepy like maid and the whole plot, and then the lady with the eyes that you can't see, and the sound in a theater of the feet running across the roof. You literally felt like you were hearing people running upstairs above you in the theater. The sound work for this film is spot on, and it scared the daylights out of me. And this was a film I instantly had to go back and watch it again. I was like, no freaking way. Spot on, amazing.
It's actually only got one jump scare, I believe. And maybe there may be one other I'm not thinking of, but really there's only one planned jump scare in that film, and that's all it needed. And it was scary. I have really good memories of that film. All right, so my mom is like also really big into horror movies too. Surprise, right? And we went to see that movie as a family. It was just me, her, and my dad. And at that moment, she screamed. And I remember seeing the entire front row jump higher up than they would have had they just been watching the movie by themselves.
Without the lady screaming?
My mom like straight up screeched. And I'm like, it wasn't that scary, but okay, well, I guess it was. But I really like that movie. It was good stuff.
Yeah, and I will say seeing it in the theater made a huge impact on me because again, like that surround sound and the way it was photographed. Yeah, it's not a jump scare movie. It's a super creepy, constant feel of like dread, like you're saying, and it builds to a really well done reveal, in my opinion. And somebody mentioned like Sixth Sense coming out a little bit before. It kind of meant like everybody was looking for like twists and things, and I don't think that that's what made the movie. The twist doesn't make the movie for me. The overall just skill of filmmaking makes the movie for me.
Yeah, I rewatched that movie too. I definitely had it in consideration. It's in my top 10 somewhere, but not in my top 5. I definitely watched it and The Sixth Sense like kind of back to back, and they definitely they fit in the same path.
Surprising for a PG-13 movie. Right? Like that's going to be on a lot of people's list, I bet. And, it's a good, respectable film. And I think it's also a good example of an A-list star. I mean, Nicole Kidman, who like is like doing a horror movie, like getting a lot of people who probably otherwise wouldn't have seen the movie to like see something that made them probably really uncomfortable and stuck with them. And yeah, I think that's a great number 4. I'm not sure if it beats The Witch at number 4, but it's a good number 4.
All right.
I didn't know the old lady and the others was Mrs. Hawking either from Lost. That makes it totally cool.
And that's what I loved about it on Lost.
That's what makes it totally cool.
That's the reason.
That's the reason.
Exactly.
Yeah, had to have a Lost connection. Right?
I got to. It's me and John.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan, you're number 3. Let's see it, brother.
Number 3, I picked Creep, which is another movie I discovered relatively recently in my life. But I got to give like props to Courtney and to Tom, I guess, for the two of you. Yeah, and you got the hat on. You're representing. I can't believe that's not on your top 5. It better be.
Is it?
I figured it would be. It's on mine.
Just not to throw Tom and Ryan under the bus. Ryan said you need to watch this movie, Creep. Put it on your list of watching because I had never heard of it, and I went out and watched it and liked it enough to even watch Creep 2. And he assured me that it would make Ryan's list or Tom's list. So if it's not on Tom's list, I'll be shocked.
I would have bet money that this movie would have made Tom's list, but it made my list for sure. I think it's a really good example of what just two people with a camera can come up with. Like in terms of John's college, high school horror guerrilla filmmaking crew that he knew. I think this movie is a very good example. They didn't even really have a script. They just kind of said, today we're going to film like a car scene while we're driving somewhere. So let's talk about some creepy stuff while we're driving. I can't explain this damn movie.
I can explain it.
Tom can explain it. He wears the hat.
So I absolutely love this film. And Mark Duplass is one of the most brilliant people. And this film did not make my top 5 because of a rule on John's.
A rule?
Yeah, it's a rule that we talked about before the show.
We have a rule.
Yeah, like it's because movies, right? It has to be like those standalone, right? Because there's 2 of them.
Right.
Okay.
Spoiler.
You
Creep
can pick
2's on my
number
list.
1. You could pick number 2. You could have put both, I guess, in different numbers. Like if you want to.
Yeah, I didn't put Creep 1 on my list.
They're similar enough.
Yeah, I
didn't watch Creep 2 again. I haven't seen it since the first time we did, so I should watch that one again.
Okay, so Creep 2 made my list.
And for people in the chat, there's several people saying they've never seen it. They're both streaming on Netflix right now.
Right now.
Okay.
Don't leave us.
And yeah,
But,
don't
you know,
leave. I'm just saying eventually if you want to check it out.
later tonight, couldn't be a bad idea.
Mm.
How do you describe that movie? What would the back of the box say?
Back of the box is that this movie was made by accident.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can kind of say that.
This movie was made by accident. There's two people in the whole movie. One of them is Mark Duplass. And the other is I'm gonna forget. It's a total fail here. I should know his name. But he's the cameraman in the film, and it's a back and forth. It's a study on a character who is very strange, and it makes you. It's the whole film is questioning whether or not this camera person is safe or not, and whether this person is being honest with them, and the person is, for lack of the better term, creepy.
Yes.
But this wasn't intended to be a horror film. This was a project between two friends while they were busy working on giant productions. Mark Duplass was working on The League all throughout this time, which is a comedy show about football, but specifically it's about
Fantasy football.
Fantasy football.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it's a show. By the way,
Duplass only from comedy. So when Ryan mentioned it, I was like, okay, I'll check this out. And I was like, oh, he's doing like a comedy. This is going to be like a comedy horror, and it's not.
No. And by the way, I like The League, and I'm not a sports fan, but I really like that show because there's a bunch of really good comedians. He's one of them. But yeah, this was a project that he did with his friend over the course of like 2 years, and they filmed just a bunch of stuff. And really what Creep was a compilation of a bunch of clips with a loose narrative. And then over time, he even said that like it was kind of regrettable, but he had to convince himself that he's like, it's not a horror movie. Like, this is not what it is. It's not a horror movie. Okay, maybe it's a horror movie. Shoot. Okay, it's a horror movie. All right, I'm going to it's going to be a trilogy now. And like, that's literally what happened. So Creep 1 didn't make my list, and I'll tell you why it didn't.
Interesting.
And when I get later in the list, but
that's good to know.
I will say I did enjoy it well enough to watch the next one, and I thought that, like you're saying, watching a film slowly evolve while it's happening, so that it starts off as like awkward, uncomfortable, like, misunderstanding. Who is this guy? Why? He even jokes that it's like that Michael Keaton movie, My Life, where he's trying to make a recording for himself. He's dying of cancer, and he invited this cinematographer up to just record him teaching his future son some things. But it quickly devolves into something, again, creepy, just really uncomfortable making. And that's the beauty, I think, of it, is the way they put it together.
It barely made Netflix. When it did, it went viral. So viral that they're like, oh, we get to make a second one. And the first one ends in a way that you go, there can't be a second one. There's no way they can film a second one. And spoiler alert, it's my number 1 on my list, so we'll save it.
Oh.
There's a lot of good chat going on here, but so then I guess we're on Tom's number 3 now, right?
Yeah. My number 3 is Paranormal Activity, the marked ones. This is my one you can make fun of me about. It's okay. This is my Zodiac, if you would.
I just watched the entire series last week, and that was my favorite one out of the whole run.
Really?
Well. Yeah, I really like that one. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. So this one's fun because I'm a big fan of the whole paranormal. It's probably one of my favorite horror franchises. I think that it's super creative, and they have to come up with things that are super unique in each one because people are going in to expect the same thing, and they are so different, and they have a really great narrative, and there's some just brilliant pieces of cinematography in these films and things that you just you can't even explain it. Like there's so many things you can't explain it, but I don't want to is probably a better way to put it. But Paranormal Activity, the marked ones, is one that didn't hit theaters for very long. It didn't do very well. And it was produced by, it wasn't the full crew. So it was an offshoot, but it's a spin-off. So no one went to go see this movie because it was a quote unquote spin-off. However, if you don't see this film, you have not seen the whole Paranormal Activity canon, because this is essential in the whole thing. It's not a spinoff. It is a part of it. Yeah. And unless you watch it, you don't know what actually happens. And a lot of the stuff in Paranormal Activity won't make sense without this movie. I also own the hat. So, I mean, like, it was, and you know what? There's parts okay, every horror movie has really weak stuff. There's like,
Sure.
you know, we can pick apart a lot of horror movies, but the ones that stick with you are the ones with good cinematography. It takes one scene for me to be like, oh my goodness, I'm going to put this on a pedestal. Blair Witch was my number 6 on this list. And it was really tough to not put it on my list. But like, that's a really good example of that whole movie, will scratch someone's head. Like, why? Why is that movie good until you get to that very end? And then you're like, oh my gosh, this is a masterpiece. This is the same thing. Like, that feeling that I got when I found out that this is part of this larger story that I threw away. Oh my goodness. And time travel's involved. What? Yeah. You got to see this movie, like pay to see it. It's like $3 on Amazon.
Yeah. I rented it on YouTube, and I had watched the first 4 paranormal films right before that. And they all, especially by the time you get to the 4th one, they're all really, really samey. Like you're looking at just security camera, like high up corner angles of people's bedrooms, like fast forward, watching them sleep. Or walking through the kitchen, or something drops off a shelf, and by the time you get to the 4th one, you're like, okay, cool. I've seen this movie 4 times now. What's up? And then you sit through the spinoff, and you're like, oh, like they're shaking it up. This is about like a lot of this movie takes place outside. There's like a group of kids instead of just a couple. You know, there's a lot of different little tweaks and changes, and yeah, it gets kind of sci-fi by the end. It's a cool movie. I didn't pick it, any of the Paranormal Activity movies, but.
And I will say I've watched, I think most of, I want to say I've seen that one when it came out, but I've enjoyed most of the Paranormal Activity films. I think they build nicely, and like a couple of people in the chat mentioned, like you start hearing every noise in the house very differently after seeing some of these movies. They really do stick with you in that creepy found footage kind of way.
Oh, can we just mention also that it pretty much changed everything for like the last 10 years as far as shaky cam, because like Blair Witch started it really, but it was Paranormal Activity that like gave it an adrenaline shot. Once that movie hit, it was like, oh wow, anybody can do this.
That's interesting, because I would have given Paranormal credit for starting the whole Conjuring, Insidious, Sinister, Annabelle,
the paranormal ghost thing.
Yeah. Like it didn't have a lot of found footage elements to it, but I think Paranormal was cool too. It had like the opposite of found footage, like not shaky cam, like a camera that
it took found footage, which was Blair Witch, and then added a modern era where we have freaking cameras everywhere. So it's not shaky camera running around with it. It's like, no, we have cameras in our homes, cameras on our front doors, cameras on our phones. It's like, it's the proliferation of cameras. And I think that was like a new layer to what Blair Witch set up.
Yeah, it was a cool next step in the evolution of found footage.
Absolutely.
When Blair Witch hit, I don't think I've ever talked about this.
Uh-oh.
When Blair Witch hit, I remember when my parents came home and they thought it was real.
Everybody did at the time.
My mom and dad thought they watched people get murdered that night. I am not lying. Like, I will never forget how my parents came and they didn't know how to talk to me. They were like, son, there's just these people. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening?
We're adults now.
We're adults. I'm like, because they sold it. Because we were in we were living in like really close to LA. So this was like, they had the props out. They're like, oh, they went all out. This is the tent we found. And they had it on display at the premiere. They sold it as actual things that happened and changed cinema. It was brilliant. But it was a number 6 on my list. So whatever.
Yeah, it didn't make my list.
I'm echoing with some of the guys in the chat because they're throwing out some other movies, and I don't want to mess it up if somebody throws one in here, but there's definitely some good Blair Witch chat going on in there. And respect for Blair Witch. I know that nowadays some people feel like it's a pretty boring film, and I will say I was pretty nauseous the first time I saw it rather than scared. But you can't argue that it wasn't a game changer, right? At its time, it wasn't. It was a big game changer.
Oh, I would say it would have made, if this was a top 5 horror endings, it would have made my list for sure.
Yeah, that's true.
So I have 2 more recent films on my list here, and this is one of them. My number 3 here is A Quiet Place.
Oh,
cool. Just in the last couple of years, I missed seeing this in the theater, and I'm really bummed that I did. I watched it at home, and I don't know if that made it more or less creepy, but I was legit scared. And as a dad with kids and trying to imagine being in that situation, you could certainly connect with that family, that father, and that experience, and the acting, the set design, the sound work, on several levels. I thought it was really well thought out, and the moments of just sheer terror where a single sound gives you away. I thought it was just really expertly done, and I hadn't seen anything quite like that. So for me, that A Quiet Place would definitely make my number 3 slot.
I thought Sandra Bullock just did such a great job in that movie. I was like, man, I
Now
believe.
you're talking about Bird Box. Don't talk about Bird Box.
Wait, oh shoot!
In my head, those are the same movie. I didn't see either one, but
no, I'm kidding. I've watched that. I watched A Quiet Place like 5 times, man. I've seen it multiple times. It's really good.
I bought it, man. Usually that's a sign for me that I really appreciate what the filmmakers and actors or whatever are doing, because I'm gonna go and I want to see it again. I want to own this.
It's like as if Ross, oh my gosh. Okay, hold on. Okay,
who are you forgetting?
I'm forgetting the name from Friends. Ross. He plays Ross Geller.
David Schwimmer.
David Schwimmer. It's like as if he made a horror movie that like did really, really well. Like John Krasinski from
is that a good thing?
I don't think it is. I'm a big Friends fan.
I'm not a big David Schwimmer fan. Though.
No, but I mean John Krasinski though. Like he went from like what person who does like such a role that is so defining goes out to actually accomplish something like a major box office hit, like A Quiet Place. Like that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
it never happens.
Yeah, he's been able to.
It happened last year, and it was a really good movie.
I think a few times over. Whether in the action films he's been doing, or whether in horror, or whether he's got another TV show now on Amazon he's doing. So
he's killing it. That's a good movie. I really liked it.
I'm really hoping he does Mr. Fantastic.
We all are, man.
Oh,
he probably will. He needs to get it. Everyone wants to get an MCU. Why wouldn't he?
Yeah, hopefully the fans can kind of tip that one over the finish line.
My goodness.
He'd be super good. Is it time for my number 2?
Yes, it is your number 2, Mr. Fire Guy.
My number 2 is kind of personal. I've asked almost everybody I know what their top 5 modern horror movies are.
Just personal, so I can't tell you.
It's personal, yeah. So we're just gonna pass. No, I haven't seen anybody else pick this movie, but I picked The Mist for my number 2.
Really?
That's a good one.
Yeah,
Stephen King.
It's a good Stephen King movie, but I saw it at a pivotal moment in my life where I had the end of this whole movie it's kind of split into 2 different avenues of horror in a way. Like it's about this kind of supernatural mist that takes over this town, and it brings with it a whole bunch of indescribable, like horrific monsters that just murder everybody. And the movie's about this group of survivors that kind of hole up in this grocery store. And I guess you could say the first half of the movie is kind of like this Lord of the Flies situation inside this grocery store where people kind of take sides and start, fighting each other almost. There's a lot of confrontation that happens. But then the second half, when a group of these survivors leave the store and try to make a run for it, basically make a break for it, and they encounter some of these giant creatures. And I was just at this point in my life where I hadn't encountered H.P. Lovecraft before, but this movie was my introduction to Lovecraftian kind of cosmic horror, in the sense that there's something bigger than humans out there, and that we are really minuscule and we don't matter, and just space is crazy. Like what's out there is unfathomable, and just it makes you feel so small and insignificant and just useless. And that level of terror just kind of hit me when I saw that movie the first time, and that has been my I want to say my favorite horror movie for a long, long time until relatively recently.
There's a lot of people who are throwing a lot of love for The Mist as well, and TJ says the novel was even better, and that people like the twist ending, of course. Yeah,
that was actually a short story in a number of other short stories.
The movie definitely took the ending and made it way darker than the short story did.
Yep.
Which I like and I don't like. I think the book has a lot of advantages, but they're both really cool. And this movie really shook me. So that's my number 2.
Did you see the black and white version, Ryan?
Yes. I like that one almost better, but it's hard to watch more than once.
Fair enough. All right, Comic Tom, number 2.
That's a really good pick, man. I like that movie.
Thank you.
My number 2 is Saw number 2. Saw number 2.
Saw 2.
Yeah, Saw 2 is on my list.
I hate you. This is what that whole live stream that I sent John was about.
So I was gonna say Saw 4. Ryan hates it. Why? It's okay.
Tom, that's okay.
Okay, so I picked Saw 2. It was okay. I wanted to say Saw 4, but my gut went with Saw 2. If we were going to talk about, like, as far as a film goes, as far as the Saw franchise, if we compare them in quality, narrative, as far as it makes sense, and character depth, Saw 4 has it. It hasn't.
I don't
It's
even
easier.
remember what that one was.
Well, then you need to rewatch all of them.
I
You
just
haven't seen
did.
them enough.
If
If you don't know the Saw story, you didn't watch it because it's really good and it takes place in what, 30 minutes? Okay, so Saw 4 would be that film, but Saw 2 is my number 2 film because it means a lot to me. I remember seeing that with family. I remember thinking, Saw 1 was such, like, it messed me up so bad.
Right.
I couldn't sleep. It was the first time that, like, I really got in my head when watching movies. Like, I saw some dark stuff, but seeing that and like the torture aspect of it really screwed me up. Screwed me up so much that I really was excited to see what number 2 would be like. And I remember thinking, like, I need to see the trailers. I need to see, like, what are going to be the contraptions? Like, what are they going to do? And I remember being so hyped because of how good the first one was, that when I saw it, I'm like, oh my, it's the same thing with Creep 2. Like, I went into it with this feeling of excitement that it's like, it's unmatched because number 1 was so good. And then I thought number 2 delivered. Now, the reason why number 2 is on my list, though, is because of one of the contraptions in particular. And this is an old movie. Okay. What was that?
Can I mention which one I think it is?
Oh, please.
Is it the Needles?
Absolutely. Absolutely is the Needles. The Needles is one of the best moments in horror and needs so much more recognition than people give credit to that. So I'm just going to plug it because I don't have to describe it too much, but I'll give you it in a nutshell, but you can check it out on YouTube. Just Google how they made that. It took weeks for these people to literally they had to get thousands of actual needles and by hand remove the metal part, the needle, and then replace it with the rubber one, and then individually color them to make them look real. Like, they went out for this. Like, that's what the Saw franchise is to me. It is a group of creatives putting together some of the most heinous stuff and it's masterpiece. It's all art. Every single one of the contraptions is art. You can, like, it's a standalone thing because it takes weeks and just masterminds to, like, put it together. And there's all these people behind an editing desk going millisecond by millisecond, then going, okay, how did you feel right there? No, you don't feel gross enough. How do you feel now? Is it not red enough? How do you feel now? Oh, is it shiny enough? How does it feel? And they do that for weeks until they get it just right, till you hate it, till you hate watching it so much that it doesn't even make your list, and you laugh at me.
I picked Saw 1 as my number 1 movie, but Saw 2, I did not.
Ooh, so Ryan's giving away his number 1 right now?
I'll do it.
Go ahead.
I love Saw 1, but Saw 2, I think, is the last Saw movie I will give any sort of leeway towards. I think that series lost all semblance of cohesion and goodness real early. I like the way that each movie kind of went back to unravel a different layer of the plot, but I don't think that kind of makes up for all of the other faults that I spot in it. But I love the first movie.
Okay, we'll end it here because I want to hear what John has to say.
Obviously,
we can keep going.
Saw is the movie that the series, they're the torture porn, right? That was the new benchmark, was torture porn. And then, Hostel and all these other films that kind of followed and built on that, Human Centipede, even if you want, they're all kind of from that era of torture porn, which I will say, as much as I did enjoy the Saw films, I think that that era might be my absolute least favorite run of horror. It got to the point where it was not scary. It was just, how graphic can we be? And I just was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with this whole thing. So it turned me off just based on it was more like, how extreme can the films get? Okay,
I got 2 very quick points. And before you go, I have to make it in defense of Saw 2.
That's fair.
Okay, 2 really quick points. Okay, so to Ryan's point,
right?
First,
okay,
you can say that about any horror movie that gets a sequel.
Sure.
Because the thing is that if it does well, it's like a show getting from pilot to HBO. If it does well, it's a miracle. If it does well, it's a one in a lifetime opportunity. If it does well, it starts there. Saw 2 is the beginning of the Saw franchise. Saw 1 is it's like it's issue 0, if you would. So that's how I feel about that. And then the second point, I'm going to save it for the number 1 on my list. John, hook us up with number 2.
Okay. So my number 2 is the only film on my list that I don't own yet. And so as the baby on my list, I just don't know if it's going to live in this position forever. But I saw it twice, and it stuck with me because I'm a big Stephen King fan. It's It.
Yeah. The new one or the old one?
The new one, of course. It is excellent. I think it captures the essence of King's novel. I don't like the second half of that novel as much as I like the stuff with the kids. I think that stuff's amazing. And I thought they did a really great job with it. Those kid actors are stupendous.
Really good.
The photography is fantastic. And I really, really liked the way they captured the essence of the first half of that book. I'm hopeful the second half will be worthy of it. You guys want to tear me in on this one?
No, I don't disagree. I didn't even really consider it at all. I didn't find it scary as much as I wanted to. I liked the way the film made me feel, and I liked the movie well enough. And I thought it was a very good representation of the book. I like it more than the miniseries with Tim Curry.
Yeah.
But it didn't, it wasn't memorable enough for me to crack my 5.
That was a miniseries, wasn't it? And Tim Curry was so good in that.
Yeah, but even that one I don't like as much as I do in my memory of it. Sure. When I go back and actually watch it again, I'm like, oh yeah, this
dated. But then it was a lot of like TV actors, right? You got Harry Anderson. You got was it John Ritter? You know, there's a lot of
John Ritter was in that. Yeah. Wow, that was
the second half again. It's a lot weaker.
It was.
And when the adults get in there, I think it really falls apart. Whereas the first half with the kids is genuinely the creepiest, and it's the same with the books, I think.
Yeah, I think the first one scared me more, but obviously I think the newer one was better. I think that was really good. But yeah, it just didn't scare me, so it wouldn't make my list. But
sure.
I bet, you know, if I was younger, if I saw it when I was younger, I would probably put it on a list of things that really scared me, because there are some. I mean, heck, the intro scene with the clown, that was great. Like they went all.
I need to see it again. I don't remember it that well.
That made it. That was a really good way to start it out, where they're like, all right, no, we're gonna take you there. Like, we're not gonna. This is gonna be a scary film.
What's the intro? I don't remember how it started.
With the paper boat going down the water.
Yeah, his little brother. Yeah, getting pulled.
Good pick, John. That's a good one.
God. Yeah. So for me, I know that there's people that love and hate it, but I having the love for that book and wanting to see a real faithful adaptation that had all the production values in it, that worked for me. So that leaves, I think, Tom's number 1 pick, which I believe we already know, but he's going to throw it out anyways. Drop it.
Oh yeah, because we did yours already.
Your number 1.
Saw,
we mentioned earlier, right?
Talked about it.
Saw 1 is mine.
Yeah, so Creep number 2. That's my number 1 right now. I mean, these are floating. I watch a lot of horror movies.
Yeah.
I watched The Meg like 3 times in the last 2 months. I'm weird like that. I don't know why. That's not even a really scary movie, but there's something about like creatures in the water swimming around that I really like. And that kind of scares me. So that's why I love horror, is because there's so many different examples of like why someone would enjoy or engage with that type of content, where others would just go, why would you ever pay to watch that? And there are people like us who actually do, and we're like, yeah, we were excited to do it, or even to have a hour-long conversation on the internets to do it. So Creep 2, this film, I mentioned before, you go into it going, they can't make Creep 2, like it can't be done, and they do it, and they don't just do it well. You're excited for the third one, because this isn't going to be a trilogy. It will be a trilogy, and it is going to come and be really good. I bet it's going to outdo all 3, and this one actually may, shift. Maybe I might even be on my list next year. Who knows, whenever the Creep 3 comes out. But the main point with Creep, because I don't want to give any of it away, is that is my point that I was making about Saw 2 that I wanted to get back to, is that the torture aspect in cinematography was new when that came out. And over this last decade, we've experienced what people call torture porn. I don't think I would call it that personally. But no, I do understand what you're talking about. And
are you saying Creep might be in that category? Because I would not count.
No, I wouldn't. I would put Creep in a different category. What I would say is that if we were to look at the Hellraiser saga, all right, Hellraiser 1, the visuals in that, there are, I think at that time, and probably for a decade, there would be people going, oh, that's too much.
Yeah,
that's way too much. I don't want. What? That's a terrible movie. That's on VHS. Oh, get that out of my house. That's that kind of movie. And then you go 20 years down the line, you go, oh, that's actually, I watch so many other movies that are like that I can stomach that. It's not a big deal. To me, Saw started that. And now I'm like, those aren't a big deal. Like, there's worse stuff. There's way worse stuff. And now torture, like it's torture porn. Man, I'll show you something that's really like makes you like, well, what the heck am I watching? Like that's actually kind of tame. So, anyways, Creep to me is our modern day next wave of horror. It is what you legit makes you question, like, what would it be like if this actually happened, and if you can be convinced to be put into that character's shoes. And that's what Creep encompasses. It's a bunch of scenes of that, of you questioning, like, what would you do in this situation? And people are out there. There are people like this, and this could happen. And you're seeing it unravel. And that's why it's number one on my list.
I would totally agree with the fact that what the part about it that's so horrifying is the way they make it feel real, right? The performances are so authentic. You can totally buy into the decision making of the characters. It's not one of those horror films where you're like, why is she going back in the house? No, it's like you could legitimately understand the social awkwardness of, no, I'll just stay a little bit longer. Or I know, no, that's not possible. This guy is really, in any way dangerous. And the thinking process is authentic because the performances are spot on.
Yeah, it earned a spot pretty high on my list because of the plausibility overall of the whole plot line. I think it seems very, very much like it could happen. I think in the way that you picked Zodiac on your list because it did happen. I think that's why Creep earns a spot, because it feels like it actually really, really could happen, and I'm sure it does happen, unfortunately.
Yeah,
for some people.
All right, so my number one has been the number one, I think, for me for a good while. For me, it's the definition of modern horror, and it's 28 Days Later.
Oh my gosh, how did that not make my up?
I freaking love this movie. I think it is Walking Dead before Walking Dead was possible or popular. I think it was just a super badass film that scared the daylights out. I mean, fast zombies. Like it's just like a nightmare scenario. I thought the photography was really, really original, and I thought that the way in which you felt like you were literally being chased by zombies. I hadn't been scared of a zombie movie like that in a really long time. Even though they're technically not zombies, I get it, but like
they're zombies.
Amazing! It was so freaking awesome, and it's a movie that several people in the chat have thrown out. I know TJ was on his. It was the one movie in his 5 that made my list. I bought this movie the second it came on DVD because I was like, this movie's amazing. I've even enjoyed, 28 Weeks Later? Just because of how good this film is.
I'll give you the first half hour of 28 Days Later, maybe 45 minutes. But the moment he meets up with Brendan Gleeson and his daughter, and the movie kind of starts to get slow and it languishes around in the countryside, and it shows a lot of scenes of them driving in the car and setting up picnics and flinging sheets around in the grass, and then you get to the end with Christopher Eccleston in that mansion and him running around.
I dig the military police stuff at the end. I dig it.
I think the only part of that movie I really thoroughly enjoy is the opening sequence. I think that truly gets to me in my core. Like that freaks me out. Like, cause I know that stuff's happening somewhere with some monkeys in a laboratory somewhere. There's some evil scientists working on something. And I know there's some group of stupid hippies who are going to go in there and free the monkeys. And that's how the world's going to end. Like that's very plausible. Like that scares me. Like that's real. But then everything after that, it bores me. That movie. I feel that way about 28 Days Later, like you feel about The Witch. Like it's hard to make it through that movie for me. And I know I might be alienating some people by going on the record.
Part of the show is that it's all opinion, right? Everybody can have their own feelings and thoughts on horror. And the even in this modern, we're talking about a 30-year, 25-year span of time. And we could all have completely diverse and interesting lists, all capitalizing on different eras within this span of time. That's what a beauty of genres of film.
Absolutely.
Very true.
I really like that movie. That church scene is fantastic.
Yes, I really like that one too. When that guy sits up or stands up, either way.
Yeah, there's laying down, stands up. That's super creepy. That's a good pick for the list. I totally spaced on that. I don't know why.
I wrote it off almost immediately. Really? I thought about it. I was like, nope.
It'd be in my top 10 for sure.
Would you guys want to throw in some of the ones that almost made your list that you're like, oh, this one was like 6. This one was right there.
Get Out was 6 or 7 for me. I think Hereditary actually knocked Get Out of my top 5 this morning. I had The Descent on my list for a long time at number 3. That also got knocked out.
I had Descent would have been on my list probably. That was like I was kind of struggling between that. I don't know if it was easy to not put it in number 5, but some of the films that I thought about was like The Descent, Hostel. I really enjoyed that franchise. That's a lot of fun. I thought about The Ruins. That's a lot of fun too. Really, like any of the self-mutilating kind of stuff it's so triggering. It makes you feel so gross. So it's like when it's done in a creative way, you're like, dang, it's memorable. You gotta at least give it that. But no,
like body horror freaks you out. Like people getting mutilated and stuff happening to you. Like that seems to be what gets Tom, I think.
Actually,
the Saw and the Ruins.
No, here's the thing. That's not what gets to. That makes me feel awkward.
Yeah.
It makes me go, ooh, and cringe. Like, how do they like? And I think it's creative. I think like for The Ruins is a good example. It's old, so I don't want to spoil it. But like, okay, the vine's getting like, it's like a parasite kind of type of thing going on. And it's crawling through them, and you can see them, and they're like, I gotta get it out. Like that's super creepy. I think that's creative. I mean, as for that when that film came out, but it didn't like scare me to my core.
Yeah,
it just disturbed me a little bit. But I got some other ones that like really scare me for sure.
Yeah.
It sucks for horror.
We didn't really talk much about like foreign horror films, but I would have had the original version of The Ring. Ringu would have been that was my number 6 pretty much the whole way along. I think that film is super creepy. I don't think the American film is anywhere near as good as it may just be that I saw that one first. That one was really near the top of my list. I thought Insidious would make my list, but having rewatched it a couple of times, I like it less every time I see it. It's really slow at the beginning until it finally, the second half is amazing when they go into the other is really great, but it takes so freaking long to get there. I was like, oh my God. So
I forgot I watched that. I watched that last week.
I loved it. It was like, this is going to be on my list. I was almost guaranteeing it. And I was like, I should probably rewatch it. And that was like, nope, sorry, not going to do it. And then what else was going to? Oh, I had a movie called The Invitation. Did you guys see that?
So good.
It's been on my Netflix list forever, but I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, you've never seen that? Oh, you got to watch that, man. That's a really good movie.
I had never heard of it, and somebody recommended it, so I went in and I watched this, and I'm like, this is a drama. It's not a horror. Until just like Creep, it starts to just unravel. And what I liked about it, like Creep, is it's the opposite of my frustration with Descent. Like my frustration with Descent, and I think Ryan and I share this, is it's an amazing claustrophobic nightmare until they throw freaking monsters in, and then I'm like, no, this is just a shit movie now. Like it seemed like I was legitimately scared. I was having trouble breathing when they're in the cave and all these things. Then they throw monsters in there, and I'm like, oh, this is just an alien movie. Like I'm not scared of it anymore. Like it doesn't. It feels like everything looks like a set now. I'm not scared. The movie magic is lost for me. Whereas I was legitimately horrified of the tight spaces. I didn't need the monster. Now, Invitation is the opposite of that. Like they add the creepy little by little, and I buy in that this could legit happen. Like it feels so authentically nightmarish.
Yeah, to say it's worth watching is an understatement. You got to put that. It's like a.
Dude, I got so many recommendations out of this.
That's a good one for sure. Yeah, good picks, John. Good picks. You mentioned foreign films. Train to Busan.
I had that. People recommended that to me a lot.
That was really good.
I finally watched Let the Right One In, but that didn't make my top 5. That's going to be somewhere in my 10, maybe, if I had to, but that didn't make my list. The Others is actually not an American film. I didn't know that. It's made by like a Spanish crew. So that technically could count.
Isn't the filmmaker somebody famous? Alejandro, God, he's like done a lot of films. He's a very talented, famous kind of guy, I want to say.
I don't remember well enough to gamble on guessing, but sure.
I will say RJ Taylor in the chat has been on fire, and pretty much every movie he's mentioned has either been one I was like thinking of putting on my list or one of the ones that made my list. So he and I are in sync. RJ, you have your star chat person for the day. You might have earned yourself a wrench today. I may have to throw you a wrench later on.
Thanks, RJ.
That's how it's done.
But yeah, you show up and respect my list when everybody shames me.
Moderator privileges.
You get a wrench for life. Oh man.
Well, props to Alec for having the right frame of mind.
Well, yeah,
him and I were
He shamed me, and yet I keep him as a wrench. So there's both. You get both. I got both.
That's fair.
This was a lot of fun. Talking horror with you guys, big horror fans. It's been a long time since I've had a chance to do that, and I really, really appreciate you guys taking the time. Today, Tom dropped a video, and if you haven't seen it, it's part of his series breaking down Infinity Gauntlet, which has always been my favorite thing on Tom's channel. It's always the thing I'd watch the instant he drops a new one. So this one was a Silver Surfer issue that connects in between Infinity Gauntlet 5 and Infinity Gauntlet 6. And you guys should definitely watch that video. Of course, the link to his channel is in the description, but you don't need it. Every one of you subscribed. So you just got to go over and watch the video that he dropped today. But is there anything else coming up? I mean, obviously, you got tomorrow your big Hot 10 list. Is there anything else coming up here soon, Tom, that you want to let people know about?
Oh, yeah. You know, we always got stuff cooking. We got top 10 coming out tomorrow, and Ryan's going to be here tonight. So you're going to
try and record that one.
You're going to be here with us. So
Should
it's going to be a fun video. We got a fun, I don't even think I'm going to call it a true first video. But there's a continuation of some Harley Quinn research I've been doing that we're going to be filming tonight that I haven't even told Ryan about. So I'm excited to do that. That's going to be dropping sometime next week. I have a really fun Golden Age show with Jeff coming out next week that we recorded. He brought over a Captain America #2 that has some unique aspects to it. Yeah, it's crazy. Like he just comes over. He's like, yeah, I had to hit the vault, the bank, I can't even keep these around, they got to come in and get out, those kind of books are going to be hitting the screen here pretty soon. We got a bunch of those that were really cool to see. And that's going to be hitting next week. And yeah, we're always pumping out content.
That's true.
It's the best, I gotta say. And I again, the Infinity Gauntlet breakdown series has been great, and there's several other great ones. There's an Ant-Man one that I think it just might be my all-time favorite. And
you like the Ant-Man one, huh?
It's so good.
That came out of nowhere. I loved that.
Yeah.
I loved that.
I enjoyed that one.
I'd never read any Ant-Man, so it was like, okay, I'll give this. I've never read any Scott Lang, nothing, and I was like, okay, I'll give this a try. And it was like, where has this been all my life? I'm now seeking out all these great covers. The Miami Vice cover is still one I've got to find. I need that in my life.
Absolutely.
That's a good one. That Taskmaster, though. I think that's the gold out of that run.
Yeah, we're almost done. Dude, we're running now. We got like 4 or so.
We're almost done with Gauntlet. It's weird. I'm going back and watching a bunch of old ones, and we're like talking about how we're never going to finish. And
it's like, here, I can tell you here. It's a lot. It's a lot of I have the playlist right there. We have put out 41 videos about the Infinity Gauntlet, and that's not like top 10 true first videos. Those don't count. I'm talking about issue by issue coverage and wherever we meandered. 41. You know how many hours of editing that is?
Dude.
Like that is like too much time.
Yeah,
that's too much time. You could have read the whole thing. But no, we're having a lot of fun. It was one of the very first videos we decided to do together. We're like, dude, like what's relevant? Well, we can start reading Infinity Gauntlet and see what happens.
Yeah, that movie's about to come out.
And yeah, and I feel like we're still just catching our stride with figuring out what we're doing to like break down issues, but we're having fun with it. It's pushing us to be creative. So I like that you enjoy those because those are my funnest ones, I think, to produce. I really enjoy doing those with Ryan.
Or work. I know that there's a lot more effort that has to go into all of that. And I appreciate it because it shows in the joy I get when I watch it. So
we're over here going like, we need to take some improv classes. Like I want to get good at doing voices. How do we do that? Like, I don't know how to do that. We're like
voices by yourself all the time when everyone's, wondering what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Like for me, when you make Ryan's voice drop down into that horrible voice.
That Quasar video. Shout out to anyone who watched that. I love that video.
I need to watch that again.
I enjoyed that when messing with Ryan's voice. That was good. That was good.
Well, thank you two for joining us. Or I should say, thank you, Tom, for joining Ryan and I for another top 5. We got to do another one of these soon. We've got several ones in the hopper that we're thinking through. If you've got a great top 5 you want us to do, drop us a little information in the comment section because we're always looking for fun ideas, and maybe you'll get to be the one to join us next time when we do another top 5. Thank you for coming by in the chat, and I hope to see you again soon.
See you guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good night.